What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Purple Manifesto: Prince, His Life, Music, and Philosophy. The title of this episode is The Early 90s and the First Prince Bootlegs. Prince is one of the most bootlegged artists in history, and it can get a little controversial. I mean, some fans, I would say a minority, but a very vocal minority of the Prince fan base aren't fans of the whole bootleg thing. But as we get into it, I'll kind of look at that and chip away at what I consider are some of the myths surrounding Prince and the whole bootleg phenomenon. Prince isn't the first to do bootlegs. I mean, the Rolling Stones and Bruce Springsteen, throughout the 70s and 80s were very bootleg, but it was mostly concerts. Um, I think in the maybe the late 80s, early 90s, Springsteen actually, was so bootleg, they actually released a series of concerts to kind of get on top of that. But Prince is a little different because, his studio stuff is extremely bootlegged as well. Um, Oh, and a follow up from the first episode for you. So, Jelly Jam, there is about a 2.5 minute early version of Jelly Jam on YouTube, and was the instrumental, the outro version, about half of what is made up of Just As Long As We're Together. So yes, it is. If you want to go back, on one of the interesting things and why I love the Prince bootlegs, and I'll get into this later, is you could really see, uh, as a budding songwriter, you can really see how Prince approaches songwriting, particularly how he edits his songs. And so, you know, you know, I was a budding songwriter. I wrote my first songs in the late 80s and early 90s, and getting a hold of the Prince bootlegs, was very helpful in learning, and Prince was a real guide. I mean, um, with the expanded edition of Purple Rain, when that was released, I mean, the hallway version, that's probably of um, Computer Blue. That was one of the critics were like, wow, this is amazing. It's weird, but it's amazing. Well, I had a copy of that in the 90s, but what's even more interesting is there's sort of uh, you follow a progression there. There's about three or four other versions that take you to the final version of Computer Blue that end up on the album. There's a couple also that will take you uh, um, where Prince, and band rehearsal, takes the song and breaks it down into what appears in the Syracuse concert. So for me, this was the really instrumental in my songwriting process, learning from Prince and seeing, how he edits down from the hallway speech version of Computer Blue to the album version. And other songs are like that, but that was the one that really stood out for me the most from Purple Rain. Where does the bootleg phenomenon come from with Prince? Well, I mean, it's the Black Album. I mean, he pulled the Black Album at the last minute. I mean, it wasn't a secret at the Black Album, and Warner Brothers, went public and said, "Yeah, Prince's next album is called the Black Album," and then he pulled it at the last minute. So of course everybody's like, "Why did he pull the Black Album?" So, um, and the Warner Brothers supposedly destroyed all the copies. Well, I lived in New Orleans from 86 to 88. And I remember, that last summer in New Orleans, Record Ron's there, in New Orleans on Bourbon Street. And they had and this is a lot of money for that time. I believe, a record, the Black Album was like $70, which I don't know what that means. That's probably 500, certainly, post pandemic is probably $500 in today's money. But people were buying them. and I didn't have that kind of cash to be buying it back then, so I had to wait until well, I think some cheaper ones came out later. But those initial ones, but I didn't get a copy of the Black Album until he actually released it in the early '90s, through Warner Brothers. But that kind of started it, and that demand and sort of fed this mystique, because as around the time the bootlegs hit in 91, 90, 92, 93, um, you know, you know, the mysterious vault starts leaking out too, and so yeah, so I think then that became part of Prince's mystique, as coming out of the '80s. So I covered, what are some of the early famous bootleg Prince shows. Well, I already discussed the Detroit birthday show in 1986 in the For You episode, but Prince did a benefit concert for the Minnesota Dance Theater in 1983. A couple things stand out with this is Wendy's first concert ever with the band, um, replacing Des Dickerson. Um, And I think this is the concert where Prince laid down some of the where Purple Rain was debuted. I think When Doves Cry and Purple Rain at least were debuted. I should check that. I'll probably check that at the um, uh, and then come back to you on it. But so, and I think the plan was to use a lot of this live footage for the album, and Prince went back into the studio and redid a lot of this. So that was and then the other big Prince bootleg dropped in 1988, and it was called The Second Show That Night, and it was an after show from the Netherlands. And it was the first after show, and Prince really became famous for his after shows because his his regular concerts were very scripted and tight and very good, obviously. Prince is known for that. But, it was a much looser thing, for the after shows and jam sessions. And so, two stark contrasts, but showed, the greatness of Prince and both elements. And so, but the second show that night was, the first is another landmark in the bootleg releases. So, got a little ahead of myself in my notes, but so here's the set list from the First Avenue show that Prince did for the Minnesota Dance Company. Let's Go Crazy, first time ever. When You Were Mine, A Case of You, Joni Mitchell cover. Computer Blue, first time ever. Delirious, Electric Intercourse. I believe that's the widely bootlegged live version, which is classic. Automatic, I Would Die for You. Baby I'm a Star, first time live. Little Red Corvette, and then Purple Rain, first time live. Then he ends with DMSR. And, this concert, by the way, is on YouTube. You gotta go listen to DMSR. I mean, Prince tears it up. And it's not a fully scripted, big arena show. And so Prince kind of lets his hair down, is kind of, when Prince is unscripted, he can be kind of very charming and very funny, and he's definitely that. And DMSR, which he closes the show with. So, of the Purple Rain stuff, the only one I Would Die for You is not a first time uh, playing, but everything else from the Purple Rain album was played for the first time at this concert. And the rumor is when they were doing the expanded release for uh, Purple Rain, is that this concert would be included in that. Well, obviously it hasn't. We're sitting how many years away from that, so I don't know whether Minnesota Dance Company has rights to that or what the deal is. But at some point that's going to come out. I think there's some pretty good. I mean, the original, my first copy of the Minnesota Dance Theater concert was not the best quality, and I know YouTube has better qualities of this concert now. So definitely check it out. So I was talking earlier, about Computer Blue and how as a artist, how seeing how Prince went through these different um, variations and different creations of the songs, and how he changed and how he edited his songs down. Do Yourself a Favor, which was, I believe, in the 1999 extended issue, which originally was written by done by uh, Pepe Willie. So go, Pepe Willie's is his, he originally wrote the song, Let Prince Use It. Prince sat on it for years, but did multiple versions of it. So look up Do Yourself a Favor and multiple, particularly on YouTube, and see Prince's different versions of that. And then you go back and see Pepe Willie's version. It's called If You See Me. And then, and this is part of the friction between Prince and Jesse Johnson, but Jesse, either his first or second album, I think it was his debut album, he also did a version of Do Yourself a Favor. So, definitely check that out. And then there's many versions out there of Old Friends for Sale. And Prince kind of watered that down. I mean, the origin of that song is, he was upset when Jesse Johnson and Morris left, particularly. Um, and Prince and Jesse have a complicated relationship. Jesse's one of the guys who would stand up to him. Wendy, from the revolution, from what I hear, when Prince was acting up, would be the voice of the band, like, Prince, knock it off. And Jesse, I mean, when the famous food fight during the 1999 between Prince and The Time, I mean, uh, Jesselyn wasn't too happy with getting food and all that, thrown all over him and messing up his clothes. And, he had to be restrained, from the backstory on it. So, but on the flip side, I mean, when Susan Rogers came to be Prince's sound engineer, Jesse, knew Prince's recording style well enough where she gave him some tips to where to start from. So she wasn't totally starting from scratch and kind of looking a total fool when Prince walked in the room. And Prince bought, when Prince got a new mixing board, Jesse bought his old mixing board. And Prince also, really respected Jesse's guitar work. I mean, Prince played all the guitar and played everything, in the first time album, but in that second album, when where there are guitar solos on it, that's Jesse's guitar solos. And then when Morris left, I mean, Prince was still, well, thinking of replacing, he didn't know what he was going to do with the time. And so he still had the time rehearsing, and he put, Jesse in charge of the rehearsals. And ultimately, I think he wanted Jesse to transition and then head the family. But that didn't happen. So that's the backstory a little bit with Old Friends for Sale. Yeah. So just like it, writers, musicians need to figure out when they write a song what needs to go. I mean, you do a lot of experimentation, you throw a lot of stuff in the wall, but oftentimes, the difference between a hit or or a just miss where the song is just off a little is you should have taken something out. Rarely is something missing that needs to be added. It happens, but you kind of know when that is. And sometimes you think something's missing, and you try 4 or 5 different things and nothing works. You're like, okay, then you become at peace with what you have. But oftentimes you do more subtraction than addition, and I find. Um, in my, when I put on my fiction writing hat, I actually am a little different there, and I do more addition, in the final drafts, particularly when it comes to description than most writers. Most writers, do a lot of taking out. Um, So that's part of the, that whole, and, as a visual artist, when you paint, I mean, there's that school of, uh, taking a black and white photo and graphite or, pencils for the layperson. And, can I duplicate perfectly, this black and white photo where people can't tell, I drew it. And then there's the, hey, I'm just gonna, what do I remove, from this picture and to make it my own, and what's important, and that's the editing aspect of things. A great example, uh, the expanded edition of, Purple Rain, Dance Electric, Prince's version. Um, there's some time times in there about I don't know, a half, 2/3 of the way in, and you go and you listen to the version you gave Andre Simone, and they're gone. Prince did the right thing. I mean, I think, I'm used to it a little, but it does detract from the song. It takes, it kind of, without it, the song is slim and banging, and it's still banging, but it's not. It's just kind of like, oh, those tom toms are kind of throwing off the rhythm a little bit. It's kind of defunkifying the funk a little. I mean, it's still funky. And so that's part of, what I learned is when Prince would edit. And one of the interesting things at the time is he would play that, they would play that in rehearsal forever after Purple Rain dropped. And then Prince just lost interest with them and, left it. And, so the band was all like, why didn't he ever release this? Why didn't we ever do this live? Well, Prince never, repeated himself as an artist, which says a lot when you have close to 40 albums. But, Prince already did his apocalyptic dance song with 1999, and so that's why he was able to, give that song to Andre Simone, and Andre tore the song up. I mean, uh, and the video was awesome too. So, yeah, so you know, strip your music down to the to bare essentials, let it breathe. Yeah, you don't want to smother your song. Okay, so Prince was a controversial dude, and eventually you're gonna have to court controversy when you cover Prince. So here's where I'm gonna get controversial because there is a wing of the Prince fan base that says Prince wanted that stuff to be released, he would have released it, and I'm not messing with it. That's your right, but here's the thing. I mean, Prince had to have known um, that stuff was out there. It's interesting because in the 2000s, with YouTube, Prince had a very interesting relationship with YouTube, and that he he was ruthless about going after anybody who used his music on YouTube. Even if there's the famous woman, the baby dancing or something, and Prince went to YouTube and had YouTube take it down, and because that people think that Prince hated the fact that the bootlegs were out there. But here's the thing: there are too many damn bootlegs out there. Like who? Like there's supposed to be a vault, and I probably just on cassette alone, just from 90 to 95, I probably have 30 concerts, on cassette and CD, and 70 to 100 unreleased songs. How does 70 to 100 unreleased songs walk out of Prince's vault unless Prince wanted it to walk out of his vault? It just doesn't happen. And, no one was ever fired for leaking music from Prince. I mean, we would have heard about it. Trust me. Nobody was ever fired. So, this is, Prince, building on that mystique. One of the reasons why he chafed at Warner Brothers is he wanted to release more music. So Prince, I guess, was like, if Warner is not going to release it, then I'm going to, release it on the sly as bootlegs. I mean, there's simply no other explanation. I mean, Prince is, the vault wasn't a vault, it was a sieve. I mean, literally that there's that much stuff out there in the early 90s. It was an obscene amount of music. I spent a lot of money. I mean, I think, you're talking 70, $100 for a CD for those concerts, in the early 90s. Um, yeah, so that, the stuff wasn't cheap. Prince wasn't seeing any money, but Prince was making, was this is when, Diamonds and Pearls, and yes, he did have some financial problems in the early 90s, but he rectified it very quickly. And who knows, he may have gotten, some quick cash from the bootleggers for giving him this loot here. But make no mistake about it, Prince was aware, and he had to have been, you know, approving the leaks and I know this is controversial, but you know, Stevie Wonder has a pretty big stash of music too, and and Stevie was the dude back in the 70s, and there's no leaks in Stevie Wonder's camp. You know, and as much as Springsteen and the Stones got their concerts, leaked. A lot of that was recording in the facility. Try to find some, unreleased studio cuts of the Stones. You can't find it. The Stones, and they have a lot of them, but they lock, they lock their stuff down, and they make sure it doesn't walk out of the studio. The Stones famously, I guess there's a British law somewhere where every so often to keep your copyright, you have to release it publicly. And so the Stones uploaded a bunch of unreleased stuff. This is in the last 5 years to YouTube, and then they had like a beep through all of them. So even if you download it, you had this annoying beep. Say it was uploaded for 24 hours and they took it down. So I mean, the Stones can be good stewards and guard their unreleased studio tracks, but Prince can't. So I know this is controversial, but there's no freaking way that Prince was not approving these leaks. It just doesn't happen. So a lot of the best leaks have already have hit in the expanded editions, uh, and I've always you know you know pondered the idea of what. Well, let me first of all, before I go into my alternative post Purple Rain release, the four best songs out there that I know of that have not been you know, professionally mastered and released. So first is G Spot, and I know the hardcore Prince fan, that's probably on the top of their list too. Number two is All Day All Night. Three is the We Can Funk, the alternate version, and then my fourth one, just I ran across this in the last year, and most of the bootlegs out there, many, from the early 90s were from the 1999 Purple Rain era. But there's a song called Neurotic Lover's Baby's Bedroom that Prince supposedly did in 1977. Man, it's a trip, but I love it. And it's a little bit of Bootsy in there, there's a little bit of P-Funk. But find that's some really cool stuff. So what if? Prince's follow up? He drops the album in between Purple Rain, and he still releases Around the World in a Day. But so G Spot, 17 Days, Erotic City, All Day All Night, We Can Funk, Electric Intercourse, Beautiful Ass, and Purple Music. That would have been some album. It would have put Dirty Mind to shame when it came to just outright sexuality. And that's probably why Prince didn't do it, because he already did it with Dirty Mind. As I said earlier, Prince doesn't repeat himself, with Dance Electric. So that's probably why he didn't do that. But that would have been a hell of an album. We Can Funk is interesting. because the one version of We Can Funk I had never heard was the version that was released on an expanded version for Purple Rain. And the interesting thing is Prince literally split the song in half, and not usually when you think of splitting the song in half, it's kind of okay. Um, 4 minute song at the 2.5 minute mark or whatever, we cut it there and get rid of the rest of it. No, Prince cut it lengthwise. He literally split the song in half. And so the 86 version um, is one half of that song. And if you listen to the, um, We Can Funk, go to the Graffiti Bridge and listen to that, then go and listen to the version released in Purple Rain, and the '86 version is the part missing. I think it's I can't remember if it's the same drum beat, but literally the the that guitar, that rhythm guitar section is the heart of the '86 version. Just amazing. I've never talking about editing songs and why I love Prince and that whole aspect of the editing. So yeah, is it controversial? Maybe. I don't think it's controversial because um, other artists with huge, you know, um, vaults of unreleased, music can, protect their product, except Prince. Prince was he got better certainly in the 2000s, but he was a micromanager. So you can't sit there and tell me that Prince did not know this stuff was flying out the door, and then he knew it was out there, because I'm sure people were like, I have friends who bought bootlegs literally in Minneapolis. So it wasn't like it was that far from, you could get the stuff in Minneapolis. Now you probably couldn't go into, what was Prince's, I think it was the Electric Lotus is the big record store there in Minneapolis. I've been there, and Prince would go in there. So they couldn't sell Prince's bootlegs. But there were Prince bootleg peddlers in the Twin Cities. Let's just say I met maybe one, maybe two, maybe more. So there's no way that Prince couldn't know that stuff was out there. And again, he was he knew it was happening. But Prince did say he first of all he knew it was coming because on Arsenio Hall, he did a second incarnation of Arsenio in the 2000s, and Prince asked him about the Vault, and he says, "I won't release it, but somebody will release it when I die." And that's what happened. So he knew it was coming. He could have destroyed that stuff. And by the way, Prince, if he wanted, he knew it was coming. If he wanted something destroyed, he destroyed it. There's the famous song "Wally" after uh, Susanna and Prince broke up, Wendy's twin, and he wrote a song called Wally, and um, Susan Rogers, the Prince's um, sound engineer at the time, loved it, so it was the best thing he ever did, but it was too painful, and Prince said erase it, and she, did erase it. Now there's a version of Wally out there on the Sign of the Times album, but it ain't that version. So, Prince knew. He already knew. The bootlegs were coming. The rumors were out there, and he knew. He didn't want Wally to make it out. To the public, and so he destroyed it. So yeah, Prince. Artists should be able to work out their personal issues in their song. Do I think everything should be released? Because I think Susan Rogers is on record, and I think the wider what's the term they like to use, the Prince alumni, and those are the people who've worked with Prince over the years, either behind the scenes or the many musicians who played in his various bands. It varies. Some of them think everything should be released, and some think uh, not everything should be released. I am of the opinion that not everything should be released. I'm not a fan, and I will cover it because I do not think it's canon. But Piano on the Microphone, that was, and it didn't do well of all of the post um, death releases. Probably the one that kind of vanished, and Sheila E. had a problem with it too, because Sheila's like, that's kind of a diary. I mean, you're exposing Prince um, you know, early, because it's basically Prince noodling around and figuring out like Purple Rain on the piano, and that's it's not really that interesting. I mean, what's really interesting, is when Prince, lays those first tracks, and you have, 70% of the song of the final version's there, and how does he get to that final version? That's what's fascinating, and that's legitimate. That's legitimate, because Prince, quietly gave a lot of money to music education and for school bands and all that stuff over the years, for high schools and stuff. And so Prince knew and respected and gave, the importance of music and giving it to youth and young adults. So I think, that's where I would draw the line. There's just certain stuff. Uh, I agree with there was, other than, Prince doing, 17 days, that should have, take that out, drop that on, Purple Rain, because, I mean, Prince kills that motherfucker. I mean, it's awesome. One of my all time favorite Prince songs is 17 Days, but he just kills it. And this is why, when I upload, episodes, I say not only for 18 and older, because I think it's the first time in all my episodes I slipped up and cursed, but I mean, that version of 17 days is that good, where sometimes you got to give it a good curse, and it's that 17 days on the piano is amazing, and yes, it deserves that curse. Um, so yeah, I mean, and how do you figure that out? Well, I mean, musicians now, and I think, hopefully at some point they'll get musicians, and at some point in this in this Prince, the Purple Manifesto um, line of episodes, I'm gonna give my 2 cents into where I think, how the the trust or the ownership of the catalog is doing. Um, but anyway, yeah, for those of you too young to remember, the bootleg flood of Prince music in early '90s. It was pretty amazing and pretty exciting to be a Prince fan. I mean, this is before the internet, so I was at Purdue University at the time in West Lafayette, and it was time, the we shared the joy with the Purdue fan, the Purdue Prince fans, and when we would come to Indianapolis and go to some of the stores and find some, gems as well. But it was an eye-opening experience. It certainly helped me as a musician. And again, Prince knew this was happening. I mean, people can disagree. I do music. It's different. It was taped back then. Now we're DAWs and stuff, but I mean, everybody else can protect their unreleased music except Prince. Come on, he's a micromanager too. Nah, Prince knew that was happening. I mean, he was fighting with Warner's the very minute the flood of bootleg hits. He's fighting with Warner's, trying to get out of the contract. This is the same time. His Warner's fight and the flood of bootlegs happens at the same time, and Prince was like, okay, you're not going to let me release more music. I'll just do it on the sly, and never totally stopped. Now interestingly, um, the concerts happened later, going into the 2000s, but there's a point, thinking about it, beyond, uh, the Batman soundtrack, where it was still very, very easy to get to live shows. And by that time, that's how Prince is making, most of his money, because he's, by the early 2000s, his money's being made on, concerts. I mean, the last Prince song ever we played on the radio was Black Sweat. So if you're making your money on, concerts, what better way to promote your concerts is than to release, soundboard recordings of your concerts. I mean, these were, crystal clear concerts that were coming out in CD. Um, and, anybody who liked Prince's music, if you heard one of those concerts, like, I have to see this in person. So, I mean, it was great advertisements. So there's a lot of different reasons for, Prince, um, you know, turning the other way, so to speak. Let's give him that, that credit there, when the bootlegs were flooding. But, there was a reason for all of that. Now, how does this, coincide or kind of jive with, Prince's attack on, folks posting stuff on YouTube? Well, I mean, Prince, the whole bootleg scene is still really, really strong, even through the whole YouTube situation. I just, you know, you know, so Prince had it both ways. He fought against, the unauthorized use of his stuff, but he also, was letting it go. Um, Prince had a interesting relationship, I think, with the internet. You said the internet was dead. I mean, Prince and David Bowie were the first to release stuff on the internet in the early 2000s. I mean, Prince had uh, MBG Music, and in the late 90s, he had his own thing where you could call, I think, and he would send you music, stuff like that. So Prince was already experimenting, after his fight with Warner's about alternative ways of getting music out there. But I think, his crusade there on YouTube against, folks posting were, I mean, I said this before. I mean, there is a crazy wing of Prince's fan base who adore and love him and hate him at the same time. It's a very strange, sort of like Star Wars fan base. And so I think Prince was just to keep him in line, would publicly go after folks and make an example of them. I don't know, taking his, his, and usually, I mean, he was going after his own fan clubs too, which is, but Prince, I guess, I don't know, he did well in the 2000s. He didn't need fan clubs. He would go after them. It was kind of, why are you going after your fan clubs? But I mean, there's a way of, I think, getting back at that crazy wing and giving himself, you know, room to breathe. Because you can get, when your crazy wing is unchecked, it can get, pretty hard to be creative. I mean, I think ultimately the crazy wing of the Star Wars fan base, convinced George Lucas, to sell it to Disney. I just think George was like, it's not worth the headache of doing more Star Wars movies and dealing with these these folks. I'm just going to sell it. There's plenty of stuff to, there left for them to mine, but I'm not going to be the one to do it. And I don't think Prince wasn't that dude. I mean, you come at Prince, he's coming back at you, fan or not. So that's my take on that. But anyway, uh, stirred up a little controversy. Hey, Prince had one of my favorite songs is Controversy. My all time, not Prince's best album, but my Desert Island, well, my favorite Prince album is Controversy. So that's what Prince was all about. But thanks for coming through. Got some more Prince coming. Got 5 albums. They're all here on YouTube and on the streaming services. Got my 2 science fiction fantasy novels on Amazon under Peter Exodus Okafor, and I got a novella there on Amazon as well, and Yeah, so my music's under Exodus. So thanks again and see you next episode.